Oh, hello. Welcome once again to Stuff and Things, where I like to talk about stuff and occasionally even things. I'm your good friend Bradley, and today is a very pleasant Sunday Stuff and Things. And on this very pleasant Sunday Stuff and Things, I will be talking about stuff and things, including upcoming videos, things that you can look forward to on Stuff and Things and Stuff and Things Plays. I'll be talking about the blend which you chose to be the next first impressions and then full review video on the channel, and how it completely surprised me. Probably the biggest difference there's ever been between my perceptions or my expectations of a blend and then what the blend actually was, so stay tuned for that. We're going to talk a little bit about the fact that I did get that bass that I was talking about on the last Sunday Stuff and Things, and how that has been learning, well, I won't say I'm learning how to play the bass, but just sort of learning, getting somewhat familiar with it. We'll see. And then, of course, we have your feedback and questions in hashtag askstuffandthings. Got too many papers here. So let's get into it. All right, so what can you look forward to on Stuff and Things and Stuff and Things Plays? Let's go with Stuff and Things Plays first. You will look forward to, please, the Elden Ring series continuing for the foreseeable future on Stuff and Things Plays. I think I've recorded 36 episodes or so, and I'm wondering how many there are going to be. It could be well over 100. I think the longest series we've ever had on Stuff and Things Plays was the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and that went well over 100 episodes. We'll see how far we get with Elden Ring. Obviously, I'm going to beat Elden Ring, but how many episodes there are going to be. It has continued to be, I think, one of the best games I've ever played in my life. It may end up being the best game I've ever played in my life. I think it's fantastic. I think the series is fun, so check that out. On Stuff and Things, this Wednesday, we will have our first impressions video of the blend that you guys chose to be the next blend for me to review. So stay tuned for that. And then we're gonna have some other stuff coming up that I'm pretty excited about. First of all, I mentioned that bass that I was going to be getting. It is the Justin, how do you pronounce his name? It's Justin Mendel Johnson or Medal Johnson. I think it's Mendel Johnson. It's the Fender Justin, let's just say this, the Fender JMJ Mustang short scale bass. And it's really cool, and I really enjoy it. And I think we're gonna do a video on that pretty soon, within the next few weeks. I'm also expecting a really cool journal cover. Some of you have just seen, or some of you may have watched, the video update I posted 6 years later on the Midori Traveler's size, or the Midori Traveler's Notebook passport size. A lot of you really enjoyed that, and I'm getting a new notebook cover that I think is gonna be really cool. It comes from Germany, and I'm pretty excited about it, and that will be coming up. It's gonna take a while for it to get here because it is coming from Germany and they have to actually make it. They're making it to my specifications. So that'll all be part of the video once the thing actually comes and I have it in my hands, but it's pretty cool. And I think if you are into journals, notebooks, pens, paper, all that stuff, please stay tuned because I think you're going to enjoy that as well. Just lots of good stuff coming up on Stuff and Things and Stuff and Things Plays. Okay, so last week I gave you two choices. That's four. Two choices. Two blends that you could pick from for me to do my first impressions and full review on next. The choices were between Robert McConnell, the original Maduro, or Freiberg and Traer Special Brown Flake. And it seemed as though most of you picked Maduro. So that's the blend that I decided to do. And my Lord, was I completely wrong about what this blend is. We all thought, or many of us thought, that the fact that it was called the original Maduro meant that it was going to have cigar leaf in it, that it was going to be maybe a straight Virginia or a Virginia-based blend that had a significant portion of cigar leaf. It was going to give that really unique character. That there are several blends out there that have cigar leaf in them. They always have a very interesting character. There's that kind of crispy, dry, fermented sort of character that just adds a really interesting thing to him. And that's what I thought Robert McConnell, the original Maduro, was going to be. That is not what it was at all. I'm not going to tell you exactly what was going on with this blend because I want you to be able to watch the first impressions video. But if you thought it was going to be a cigar-based blend or a cigar leaf blend, You will be surprised. I was certainly surprised. It was a weird one. It was a weird one. If any of you in the comments have had this blend, I guess you can feel free to say whatever you want in the comments, but maybe if you're thinking about it, if there are other people who haven't had this blend and they're looking forward to the first impressions video, maybe save your comments about Robert McConnell, the original Maduro, until that first impressions video post, because yeah, I just don't think I've ever been as wrong about what I thought a blend would be. And it typically, with the first impressions video, I often have a good idea of what the component teas are going to be in the blend, and so from that I can get a pretty good idea of what the blend is going to taste like. If I don't know what's in the blend, I don't look it up beforehand. This one, it says right on the back of the tin what's in it, but I didn't look at that before I did the first impressions video. So my idea of what this blend was going to be was just very different from what it ended up being, and I think you're going to really enjoy the first impressions video, and that will be out this Wednesday on Stuff and Things. Many of you who have been with me for a very long time will remember that way back in the day when I used to record videos in my old apartment, you would sometimes see a bass hanging on the wall behind me. And a lot of you thought, I think reasonably, when you saw that, oh, Bradley plays bass. Let's ask him questions about bass. Fact of the matter was, I didn't really play bass. I had gotten that bass years before because I was in a band and our bass player's bass had gone kaput and we were recording an EP at the time, and so we needed a bass, and I thought, well, I'd maybe like to learn how to play bass too, so maybe I'll get one. They can use it when we're recording and then I'll have it. We used it for that, and then I didn't really touch it much after that. It was a Fender, it was a deluxe P-Bass Special, I think. So made in Mexico P-Bass that had jazz bass and P-Bass pickups, and then the electronics were active, so you actually had to put a battery in the back of the bass. And I didn't love that. I kind of got it based on the spec of someone who wanted to use it. And I didn't love the fact that it had active pickups. It was a fine bass, it was good, but I had decided that I wanted to sell it and get a short scale bass, which I did, and I was actually very surprised to see that I got more than I paid for that bass when it was new. So I almost got enough to completely cover the costs of the new bass that I just got. And so I had some criteria. Being someone who mostly plays guitar, I wanted a bass that was more comfortable for me as a guitar player, because I don't ever consider myself, or I don't ever imagine myself becoming a bass player. I just want to have a bass to be able to record with and also just kind of play around with. So I wanted short scale. There aren't a ton of options for short scale bass, so I was looking at Fender, I was looking at Gibson. Gibson stuff is just way too expensive. And there was this Fender JMJ road-worn Mustang bass. And I wish I had it with me, but I don't have it with me now. But if I do a video on it, which I'm sure I will, you'll be able to see it. But it's cool. It has a nitro finish, so nitrocellulose lacquer instead of poly, which to me has become a very important thing. It's something I really, really like in a musical instrument. Vintage style pickups. Just a nice kind of vintage spec'd bass. It's basically like a 1966 Mustang bass, except I think the radius on the fingerboard is 9.5 as opposed to 7.25 as it was originally. Anyway, not to get too detailed into this, but I wanted nitro, I wanted short scale, and it had really good reviews. People seemed to like it, so I was able to pick one of those up. It's been out, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now, maybe longer than that. So it wasn't, it's not a brand new bass on the market. But I got it. The only thing I don't love is the road-worn finish where they artificially relic it. It's fine. It feels good. I like how thin the finish is, and I like how it feels in the hand. But some of the wear that they put on it is just, I don't know. It's like they just took an awl or something and just kind of poked at the guitar, and I don't really know how that ever would have happened to a guitar unless you just took a screwdriver or something and jabbed it at the guitar. Anyway, it's fine. I don't really care that much. But the main point of bringing all this up, and I'm sure I'll be talking about this in the video when I do it, is that being someone who plays guitar, and you think, oh, well, a bass is a guitar minus 2 strings and an octave lower. So I should be able to play bass. If I can play stuff on guitar, I should probably be able to play stuff on bass. And I mean, I know that's not really true, but it's impossible not to have that kind of in the back of your mind. Like, okay, I'll be able to pick this up and I'll be able to figure out some bass lines. I've been working on writing some songs lately and trying to record, and I thought, okay, I can get a bass and just lay down bass lines. It shouldn't be that big of an issue. It's a lot different than guitar. And I'm sure that's going to be obvious to anyone out there who plays bass, but you know, I can play notes on the bass that sound okay with what I'm playing on guitar, but when you put that all together in the context of a song, like mixing a song together, you realize just how important the rhythmic quality of bass is. And obviously there's a high proportion of rhythm when you're playing guitar as well, but the bass can be so foundational and should be so foundational. And then of course, when you're trying to mix drums into all this as well, you realize like, okay, this thing that I thought sounded good doesn't really sound good in the context of the entire song. And you have to sort of scale things back. And I've been learning, maybe I don't need to do something as complicated as I think sounds good. Maybe I need to just be on that root note sometimes, or be on that one beat, you know? And I don't know, it's been interesting. I'm playing mostly with the pick. I'm trying a little bit of finger stuff too. Which doesn't come as naturally, obviously, because I'm used to playing a pick, but I kind of like, the bass came with flat wound strings on it, so it has that sort of dead, thuddy, vintage quality to it, which I like, and then the pick brings a little bit more attack and it sort of cuts through. I don't know, it's been really interesting and fun. I've been looking kind of at some different bass lines and sort of figuring out, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, I could just play the root note, that could be kind of boring, or I can try to play scales or notes from scales over chords. How does that sound? Should I be all over the neck, or should I be, I don't know. It's been really fun. I think if you play an instrument, or you're trying to learn an instrument, it may seem counterintuitive, but at least from my limited experience, it does seem beneficial to branch out. And even if it doesn't mean that you're going to devote a lot of time and effort into this other instrument, taking something else that's maybe in a similar realm as the instrument you're playing and experimenting with that, I think will broaden your horizons a lot. And it makes you think differently, not only about that instrument, like I've realized that a lot of my perceptions or preconceptions about what a bass did, or what I thought it would do within my mixes is much different, but then it also makes me think differently about guitar as well. It's just really cool. I really enjoy it, and it's really made me listen to bass playing a lot more closely. I've been listening to songs and really kind of just drilling down and thinking about the bass. So I highly recommend, if you play an instrument, if you play guitar, maybe if you have a friend or someone who owns a bass, ask to borrow it and fool around with it a little bit and see just how different it actually is from guitar. It's pretty cool. All right, gang, but now it is time for your questions and feedback in hashtag #AskStuffandThings. Remember, if you have a question for me and you would like it answered on the Sunday Stuff and Things, you can tweet at SAT Bradley with the hashtag #AskStuffandThings. You can also write me questions via Patreon if you are a Patreon supporter, and that will put you right at the top of the list. Also, you can leave me comments on YouTube videos, my YouTube videos. I try to go through all the comments. I definitely read them all. I don't have a chance to respond to all of them, but I do try to pick out some good feedback and questions from the YouTube comments as well. So first, via YouTube and FISAR, but the FIS are capitalized. They say, "Hi Brad, I have an idea for I'm Not Going to Like It." That was a new series that I'm sure we'll be putting some more episodes into eventually. "Please, if you can get any, try out Kentucky Bird. It's a light aromatic with rose petals. Made by STG. Maybe you won't like it, but I love it." That's a good suggestion, because if there is one thing I hate, is food that is flavored with rose, whether it be rose extract, whatever. I remember when I was a kid, we took a field trip to this house in the town where I'm from, and it was an old house, I mean old by American standards, that was built in the early 1800s or like mid 1800s. And while there, they had everything done up, like the rooms looking as though they would have looked at the time. And they had these desserts that were these little cakes, kind of like, I guess, tea biscuits, sort of, but they were flavored with rose. And I remember eating one of those and thinking at the time that it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever had in my entire life. And that has stayed with me throughout my life. And now whenever someone's like, oh, this is flavored with rose water, I hate it. I don't want to taste flowers when I'm eating food. I don't eat flowers. I don't want to taste them. And imagining that, and a lot of the things that I enjoy about pipe blends are the things that I enjoy about food. There are some things that don't cross over. Like I really like the taste of creosote in a pipe blend. I wouldn't like that in my food, but a lot of other things do transfer over. And so if I don't like rose in food, I probably won't like it in a blend. But anyway, I'll try to look out for Kentucky Bird. That might be an interesting one to do. So thanks for the suggestion. Now we have some feedback from the Sunday Stuff and Things. A lot of people were talking about the ding that I got in my guitar. I got a lot of feedback about that. So I'm just going to pick out a few of them. AZHawk516 says, I feel your pain. I put a ding on the neck of my new Gretsch White Falcon. Nice guitar. And with the ring on my finger. I have come to grips with it, and it's part of the story of the guitar. I'm glad that you're able to live with that. I see these people who do guitar videos all the time. Like there are people who, Norman's Rare Guitars is a channel that I watch on YouTube sometimes. And there used to be a dude, Mark Agnesi, I think his name was, who always had all sorts of rings on his fingers. And then he would always wear this leather jacket with zippers and metal buttons all over it. And then he would be playing like a 1952 Fender Telecaster that they had in the store that was worth tens of thousands of dollars. And I just would see these rings scraping all over the neck and then his zippers and buttons all over the guitar. And I just think, why? What are you doing? And obviously, if you don't have a 1952 Fender Telecaster, then it's not quite as important. But I would just think that's crazy when people have all these rings all over their fingers. I'm assuming maybe that was your wedding ring. So if you have a wedding ring, yeah, I don't know how you would avoid scratching the guitar neck. Anyway, that's a cool guitar. We have it was a much, much longer message than I've kind of edited it down a little bit from Wade Hampton. They say, oh man, that sucks about the ding in your brand new guitar. I try to mitigate damage by always wearing a strap, even while playing sitting down. I'm one of those guys who tries very hard to keep my instruments looking like new for as long as possible. The first ding is a killer and hurts the worst. I was on stage with my first Les Paul. Did I say the worst? Hurts the worst. I was on stage with my first Les Paul and someone knocked a guitar stand into the front of it, right in the middle of the top. It put a permanent dent into the wood and it's still there over 40 years later. The rest of the guitar is still nearly pristine, but that dent is right out there in front for everyone to see. What you mentioned about wearing the strap is a really good call, and it's something that I used to try to remember to do because I always have straps on my guitars. And when I sit down, when I used to sit down and play, I would put the strap on. And if I had had the strap on when I dented my guitar, it wouldn't have happened because basically it flipped down. The strap would have prevented it from hitting my desk, but I didn't have the strap on and it hit my desk. So that's very good advice. I'm okay with the ding. I'm okay with wear in general. It's just, that was such a stupid thing. And like I said, I don't baby my instruments, but I'm not the type who knocks them over or does anything like that. And so they don't usually get dented or chipped. And so if it's something that just naturally occurs playing wear or naturally occurring playing wear, I'm okay with that. It was kind of annoying how that happened, but I'm already fine with it. I lifted the dent so it's not really obvious as I'm playing. I don't feel it. And I'm not worried about the paint being missing. That's going to be fine. Anyway, we have a comment from Bim Scootney, who says, I had a nice ding in the finish of my guitar. Luckily, the paint didn't chip out, mainly just chipped off the clear overcoat. I used some super glue and put a few drops on the ding. I built up the super glue until it was a little higher than the surface of the guitar. Then I taped off around the super glue with masking tape, took a regular razor blade and gently scraped away the excess super glue until it was level with the guitar surface. Then I got some auto polish and hand polished it back to a nice sheen. Worked great. Could hardly tell it was there. That's a good method, I think, for people who have a ding where the paint hasn't been removed, and maybe if you have like a thicker clear coat over your guitar, that could work well. Thank you, Bim, what was it? Bim Scootney. Next, from Russell Oxley. Hey Brad, sorry to hear about the unfortunate experience you had with your guitar, which is absolutely gorgeous, by the way. To me, the ding looks awesome. Beautiful and pristine is nice, but I always felt like the coolest Fenders were the dinged up ones that had the biggest stories to tell. Enjoy your journey with it. Thank you, Russell. And I had a lot of people saying that, like, a ding shows that you use your instrument. And that's true. Except I never ding my instruments, but anyway. Next, from Scott Free. My dad is 91 and S'd a P through the 50s before switching to, what do we call these? C's? I think you'll know what I mean. In the 60s and 70s. He tells me he S'd only 2 T blends the whole time. Carter Hall and George Washington. He said Carter Hall was his special occasion blend because it was more expensive. He S'd whatever P's were at the hardware store he went to, usually K Woodies and Yellow Bowls. We talked recently about gimmick P's from that era, and he laughed saying that there were some crazy ones. So we had talked about whether or not way in the past was the golden age for the pipe hobby, or if it was now because of so many blends being available. And a lot of people have sort of similar experiences with people they knew back in the day who they would just pick 1 or 2 drugstore blends and just only S those their entire lives. And most people use like drugstore pipes, like K Woodies and things like that. So it's cool to get that confirmation. Scepter says, that's a great bass. Please do a video on it. So a lot of people said that they would like to see that video. So they will get that video eventually. And from T. Lee says, holy hell. Well, they didn't say hell. They just said holy. Holy Uzumaki is one of my favorites, so I think they mean like holy S or holy hell. Uzumaki is one of my favorites. Uzumaki. Did not take you for a manga anime fan. Actually, I should have noticed the Uzumaki sooner since I've been watching your PT reviews since 2017. Did you have that up there long? And then he edited it and said, oh wow, I noticed you have Berserk as well. So people mention that sometimes. I know a little Japanese, so that has kind of led me to be interested in Japanese things, cultural things, anime, some music, films, stuff like that. I'm not super into anime. I've watched some series that I really enjoy, and I haven't read a lot of manga, but there is some manga that's really interesting. This is a really warped, weird, kind of horrifying thing. It's also kind of funny at the same time, not for children. Same with Berserk. Not for children. Just because it is in sort of graphic novel form does not mean that children should be reading it. It is extremely graphic and violent and disturbing in some ways. But there's some artistry there, and it's interesting. So if you've never checked out Junji Ito, he does some really interesting stuff. And then the Berserk manga is considered by some to be, you know, kind of a seminal work, but it definitely wouldn't be for everybody. So I wouldn't recommend those with perhaps delicate dispositions checking that out. But thank you all so much for your feedback and for your questions. Please keep them coming in. They really help just kind of with the whole structure of the show. It's fun to interact with you guys in that way. And thank you all so much for watching. But before we go, it's time for the very best part of the show, and that is where we thank our Patreon supporters. The people who support the channels on Patreon are heroes. Unsung heroes, except the fact that I sing them pretty much every week. And we appreciate them very much because they help pay for the fancy camera that is filming this video right now, the lights that are shining upon me, other things that we can get into the Stuff and Things studios for review. It is very, very helpful, and it is much appreciated. If you would like to support the channels, there is a link in the description box to our Patreon Patreon page below. You can click on that if you want. There are also other ways. There is the super thanks button on YouTube now. So if you don't want to subscribe to Patreon or anything like that, you could just individually click on a video. And if you like what you're seeing, you like what I do on the channel, you can hit that super thanks button and leave a donation if you wish, which would be much appreciated as well. But every week we like to shout out those who support the channels at $25 or more a month. People like Kirk Crompton, Private Eye, Glenn, Jason Buckner, Gloria Phillips, Matt Marino, MDoftheNorth, and David Gaudreau. Thank you all so much for your support. And of course, we shan't forget the Maniacs, the crazy people who support the channels $100 a month. People like our good friend and award-winning author, Peter Straub, stolid and dependable Bob Magee, and rising from the ashes, Ashes of the Phoenix. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, liking. All of that stuff really helps with the YouTube algorithm. So if you haven't been subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you haven't liked that or pressed that little like thing, do that. Leave some comments because that helps me out getting good stuff to talk about in the upcoming episodes. Please stay tuned for the first impressions video of Robert McConnell, the Maduro. There will also be a video on that bass coming up soon. That journal cover will be coming up soon, or notebook cover. Lots of good stuff, and of course, Elden Ring on Stuff and Things Plays. But until next time, until we meet again, I've been your good friend Bradley. You've been the audience. This has been Stuff and Things on a very pleasant Sunday Stuff and Things. I'll see you later. Hello.